Good morning and welcome to the Morning Market Call. I'm Julie Kellett and joining us today is Jim Fowler, second-year MBA student, also the president of the China Business Club. Welcome, Jim. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. Today, because we have Jim here, we want to talk a lot about China and get a view from your perspective on where China's going and some of the obstacles that might be in their future. Just recently, China released their third quarter growth rate and stated that the economy grew at 8.9% in the third quarter. And this is just amazing growth considering the global recession and some of the other factors that the world's facing right now. What do you think is the main driver of this growth?
I think the main driver is definitely government stimulus. China quickly rolled out a stimulus package of almost $2 trillion, and that's comprised primarily of government spending and about another trillion of low interest bank loans.
Yeah.
And
sure.
most of these went to construction and infrastructure projects. Now, a few questions remain, however. First of all, how accurate are these numbers? Are they supply or demand driven?
Yeah.
Or, and if they are demand driven, where is the inflation that you would normally see with this kind of growth? Some experts are torn. Some say that China's growth is naturally deflationary. Others say that China's growth really isn't at 8.9%. That number's not real.
Why is that?
Well, first let's look at the facts. Then maybe we can discuss how that factors into
Sure.
whether or not these numbers are accurate.
Okay.
First of all, China's manufacturing purchasing managers index has been positive for the last 7 months.
Mm-hmm.
The job creation, net job creation has been positive as well for the last 5 months. However, exports have been down for the last 11 months. China's economy has traditionally been export-driven.
Sure.
Now, the other pillar of the economy is domestic demand. But if we look at year-over-year retail growth in China, look at the last quarter. For each month of the last quarter, that rate's been above 15% for retail sales in China. So that, on the surface, looks like it would be an indicator of domestic demand. However, it's important to note that that number also includes government purchases and goods shipped from factories but not necessarily sold in retail outlets. So I think that's hardly a reliable measure of demand in China. And if demand really is weak, then that would also explain the lack of inflation that we're seeing. So, in short, it's definitely stimulus-driven, and we can't really be sure how much the economy is really growing. So, to get back to your question, why is the number not necessarily accurate?
Can we believe those numbers that the Chinese government puts out into the press?
Well, yes and no. For one, back in 1978, Deng Xiaoping came out with 8%. I think it was his best guess at what sort of growth China would need to maintain job creation and hence social stability. Since then, for over the last 30 years, that number hasn't really fluctuated too much above and below 8%. It rarely dips below 7%, rarely above 10%. So this sort of growth, I think, is sustainable in some respects.
Sure. So what ways is it not necessarily sustainable?
It wouldn't be sustainable if they continue with this export-driven fixed asset investment model.
Yeah.
There are huge social and political and also environmental implications to this sort of model. And this sort of growth has already resulted in overcapacity in certain industries like steel as well as cement, for instance. So I think lack of sustainability is a huge obstacle.
Sure. And so one of those obstacles is probably just the Chinese consumer, right? We know the habits of Chinese consumer is to save maybe up to 50% of their income. So how will China overcome that obstacle?
Well, first of all, I think local officials as well as central government officials need to have different incentives. Traditionally, they've been only incentivized to raise GDP at any cost.
Sure.
And this has led to a lot of fast-paced development of highly polluting, highly energy-intensive manufacturing. And their manufacturing base is their competitive advantages based on a labor arbitrage.
Mm-hmm.
So if we look at all those factors, labor rates are increasing as China moves up the value chain and productivity improves. Being the world's widget plant, China is increasingly polluted.
Mm-hmm.
And what we don't see is, in the West often, is this response from the Chinese public. There are tens of thousands of riots every year.
Mm-hmm.
I think, for instance, farmers protest that these factories often ruin their land.
Mm-hmm.
If they have land after the factories move in.
Sure.
The pollution ruins their land and their water sources. So there's a lot of political pressure right now on the central government to clean up their development portfolios, and I think that'll increase China's manufacturing base as the manufacturing base moves further inland to second and third tier cities.
Yeah.
So to get to your question, I think the consumer credit is a huge issue.
Yeah.
If you want to spur consumption in China, you have to, one, give the Chinese consumer better access to consumer credit,
Mm-hmm.
and you also have to provide a social safety net that will incentivize people to not throw so much money under their mattress,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Sure. So do you think China will become this world power that they're positioned to be, that people believe they will be, or do you see some of these obstacles being too great for them to overcome?
I think it's a fairly safe bet that China will be the next largest economy among the developing nations.
Mm-hmm.
But India very well could overtake them because their population is growing more rapidly. But it's possible that China could rescind the one-child policy,
Mm-hmm.
and we could see a rapid population growth there as well. So it's anyone's guess. Short of avian flu outbreaks or other acts of God, I think the most important point is that China's economy is robust, it's growing, and it should be an important factor in any company's global strategy.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. We all want a piece of that pie, huh?
I should hope so.
Well, thanks for being here today, Jim. We appreciate you sharing your thoughts on China, and we'll see you next time here on the Morning Market Call.
Thanks.
Morning Market Call is a production of the Marriott School of Business at Brigham Young University and is made possible by generous donations from Larry Kashjan and Gary Williams. This webcast was produced by Greg Lee, Tim Hart, Julie Kellett, and Jonathan Marugi.